Okay. So next, enzyme inhibitors. So some of the chemical substances, those are inhibit, means to stop the activity of an enzyme. Those are simply called enzyme inhibitors. అంటే కొన్ని కెమికల్స్ ఎంజైమ్ యాక్టివిటీని ఆపేస్తూ ఉంటాయి. సో ఎంజైమ్స్ పనిని ఆపేస్తూ ఉంటాయి. వాటిని ఏమంటారు అంటే ఎంజైమ్ ఇన్హిబిటర్స్. సమ్ ఆఫ్ ద కెమికల్ సబ్స్టెన్సెస్ విచ్ ఆర్ ఇన్హిబిట్ means to stop the activity of enzyme. Those are simply called enzyme inhibitors. According to your syllabus, there are 3 types of enzyme inhibitors. One is called competitive inhibitors. Second one, non-competitive inhibitors. And the third one, allosteric feedback inhibitors. Feedback inhibitors are also called allosteric modulators. So there are 3 types of inhibitors. First one is the competitive inhibitors. So competitive inhibitors ante, so some of the chemical shape is similar to or resemble to or similar shape of the substrate. Some of the chemicals, the shape of that chemical is similar to the shape of the substrate and occupy the active site of an enzyme and inhibit the enzymatic activity. For example, one of the important step in Krebs cycle during that respiration. So in that one, that succinic acid. So that succinic acid is converting into fumaric acid in the presence of enzyme succinic dehydrogenase. So in this one, మొన్న ఎగ్జామ్ 2020 నీట్లో వచ్చిందమ్మా ఈ బిట్. సో in this one of that acid that is called malonate or malonic acid. That shape of the malonic acid is resembled to the shape of the succinic acid. The shape of the malonic acid or malonate is resembled to the shape of the succinic acid and occupy the active sites of succinic dehydrogenase. That function of the succinic dehydrogenase will stop due to the malonic acid. అంటే యాక్చువల్గా సక్సనిక్ యాసిడ్ ఫ్యూమరిక్ యాసిడ్గా మారాలి అంటే సక్సనిక్ డిహైడ్రోజనేజ్ ఎంజైమ్ కావాలి. అయితే ఈ మెలోనేట్ షేప్ సక్సనిక్ యాసిడ్ షేప్లో ఉండి దట్ కెన్ ఆక్యుపై ద యాక్టివ్ సైట్ ఆఫ్ యాన్ ఎంజైమ్ సక్సనిక్ డిహైడ్రోజనేజ్ and stop the function of the succinic dehydrogenase. Hence that succinic acid does not converting into fumaric acid. That type of inhibitors are called competitive inhibitors. Telugulo poti pade antam. So second one, non-competitive inhibitors. So these non-competitive inhibitors are nothing but some of the poisonous substances. Some of the heavy metals like mercury, copper, silver, cadmium, etc. So those are the poisonous materials. So those are not occupy the active site of an enzyme. But other than active site, they are attached to the other than active site and inhibit the activity of the enzyme. That is non-competitive inhibitors. Those are called non-competitive inhibitors. Even so that shape of the substrate, that shape of the competitive inhibitor is resemble to the shape of the substrate. ఇక్కడ షేప్ అలా ఉండదులే కానీ ఇవి some of the poisonous substance, those are occupy other than the active site. Those are occupy the other than active site. Those are non-competitive inhibitors, heavy metals of the mercury, copper, so cadmium, silver, etc. And the third one, most important one, feedback inhibitors. మన నీట్లో ఇది వచ్చిందమ్మా, మెలోనేట్ నీట్ పేపర్ 2020లో వచ్చింది. సో ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ ఇన్హిబిటర్స్. సో ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ ఇన్హిబిటర్స్ అంటే ఎలా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేయొచ్చు అంటే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఏ ఈజ్ ఏ సబ్స్ట్రేట్, సో దట్ ఈస్ కండక్టింగ్ ఇంటూ బి, బి టు దీస్ ఆర్ ఇంటర్మీడియట్ కాంపౌండ్స్ సి, సి టు డి, డి టు ఈ, ఈ టు ఎఫ్. So remembering that one, that F is product. F is considered as a product. Okay, when we are observing this one, that product is the F, but substrate A. Ikkada enzymes ఉన్నాయి అనుకుందాం, different enzymes. So what is that end product F? The end product of the reaction, the end product of the reaction will inhibit the activity of the first enzyme, feedback. The end product of the reaction will inhibit the activity of the enzyme that involved in the first reaction. So that is called ila B ila anuko. So ikkada B daga marutundi. This is the enzyme. The accumulation of end product evaru ikkada F, the accumulation of the end product can inhibit the activity of the first enzyme. Hence it is called feedback inhibitors, are also called allosteric modulators. These are also not occupy the active site of an enzyme. Only competitive inhibitors are occupy the active site of an enzyme. Non-competitive and feedback inhibitors are occupy the other than active site. So in this one, you can see the one of the example in respiration, first step glycolysis. In this one, that glucose combined with ATP to form into glucose 6-phosphate in the presence of enzyme hexokinase. In the presence of enzyme hexokinase. So you can see this one, this is the substrate. So glucose 6-phosphate is a product. Enzyme hexokinase. The accumulation of the product glucose 6-phosphate can inhibit the activity of an enzyme hexokinase. That is called malla back ochindi kada, andike that is called feedback inhibitors. That is also called feedback inhibitors. Okay, so that is the another important one. So these are the enzyme inhibitors. And the next you can, before going to another topic, you can say the recapitulate once again. Enzyme inhibitors, some of the chemicals which can be stop the activity of an enzyme, those are called enzyme inhibitors. There are 3 types of enzyme inhibitors. One is competitive inhibitor, second one non-competitive inhibitors, and the third one feedback inhibitors. So competitive inhibitors are occupied by the active site. The shape of the chemical is resembled to the substrate. These are poisonous substance. This is the accumulation of end product can inhibit the activity of the enzyme that involved in the first reaction. So that is feedback inhibitors. Okay, are you clear? So example to feedback glucose, first step in the glycolysis in respiration, glucose combined with ATP to form into glucose 6-phosphate in the presence of enzyme hexokinase. So in this one product is the glucose 6-phosphate. The accumulation of more amount of glucose 6-phosphate can inhibit the activity of enzyme hexokinase. These feedback inhibitors are also occupied other than the active site. Those are also occupy the other than active site. Those are called feedback inhibitors.